Hi everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Stellium Astrology podcast. I'm Stephanie James, your host, and I am the founder of stelliumastrology.com, tutor at the London School of Astrology, and I've also written horoscopes for Elle magazine as well as various other publications. And today I want to talk about, I'm sort of doing a little window into talking about stellia or stelliums, as people generally tend to refer to them. We've kind of talked about what a stellium is and how rare a stellium is, but now we're going to talk about whether they're good or bad. Is having a stellium good or bad? Well, it's one of those questions I don't really like. I'm afraid. I don't like asking or answering, if someone says, is it good? Is it bad? To me, having that kind of question, it doesn't feel like stelliums really are, when you're born with a stellium in your chart, it's just who you are. It doesn't mean it's good or bad. It's like anything in astrology. There's going to be tough times. There's going to be challenging times. There's going to be times when things are easier, but do the easier times force us to improve ourselves, push ourselves, move forward in a more positive way, create solutions, develop our personality, develop ourselves spiritually and evolve? Often not. They are nice. It's good to look back on times of fond memories and, really enjoy certain aspects of our lives, but it's sometimes the more challenging times you can look back and go, oh god, that was stressful. Like Saturn transit, for example, me having Saturn transit my sun that year. I mean, literally as soon as Saturn went into Capricorn, I felt it immediately. I really felt it, and I knew that I'd started a new job, and I just knew that it was going to be a much more serious job, and I'd just come from Saturn in Sagittarius, and I was working in the charity sector, and it was just like fun. You got to wear what you wanted to wear. You were allowed to have a joke and a laugh. You were allowed to talk to each other. It was very sociable. It was a really, really nice, fun environment to be in. And I went from working in the charity sector to then working in the NHS, the National Health Service in the UK. And almost immediately, so I think I started my new job in December of 2017. And I think Saturn had entered Capricorn. Had it already entered at that point? I think it went in December, but I can't remember which date in December. But oh my goodness me, almost immediately I could feel what that was going to be like. It was much more serious, much more responsible. Not that much money, if I'm honest. It was less money than what I'd been earning before, but because I'd relocated, I had to take what I could get. And typically, the National Health Service doesn't pay particularly good wages in the UK. The healthcare system is not known for its, it's overworking and underpaying people. But yeah, so having Saturn move through Capricorn, it was like almost an immediate kind of, whoa, heavy. And that continued. The heaviness just continued. And I had, by the time Saturn reached my sun at about 18 Capricorn, 17 actually, 17 minutes, 17 degrees and 43 minutes of arc is my sun. And around just before my my birthday in 2019, so my, no, oh god, brain. So anyway, whichever birthday it was, we had a CQC. Oh no, so just before my birthday in 2019, that's when I started getting, I was starting to do Elle magazine and writing horoscope columns, and and on top of that, writing horoscopes for my website and for another magazine, and seeing clients, and this is all on top of having my day job. So all the while Saturn's been in Capricorn, I've been like really antisocial, really isolated, relocated, didn't make many connections, working constantly, practically. And then I think when Saturn moved over my sun, I had the career defining aspect. You know, you could say, oh no, Saturn's going to go over my sun. Is this going to be bad? It's going to be hard. It's not going to be bad. You know, it's just going to be difficult. It's going to be challenging. You're going to have to really step up, take responsibility. You know, and you know what you with Saturn, you get out what you put in, and you know you can either shy away from the responsibility and then look at that as a missed opportunity to really develop yourself. And like I said before, with Saturn and Jupiter, Saturn's the tough teacher that you know you kind of not overly keen on. Jupiter is the teacher that everybody loves and is fun, you know, the fun class to turn up to. So, you know, I know I'm focusing here on Saturn and Jupiter, but for example, you know, if someone was to say, is this transit going to be good or bad? I would say it's going to be defining. It's going to crystallize your future prospects and where you want to be. You know, then I had Saturn was still hanging around my sun, very close-ish to my sun. And a year later, and we had a CQC inspection in my NHS job, which was so stressful, so unbelievably stressful. We passed and we got good. And then the following year we had the pandemic, and then I started my podcast. So, you know, there's a lot of things that really came into manifestation through a Saturn transit, whereas, you know, people go, oh God, Saturn is such a tough teacher, so hard, so difficult. And, you know, there are other transits that are difficult, you know, they're challenging, they implement change. And I think that's what's hard for a lot of people is it's more about change and how you cope with change that defines what's good and bad for you, and how much you hold on to certain things and how much you're looking for something new, whether or not you can view something as good and bad. And don't get me wrong, there's going to be times in your life where things are going to be really challenging, really hard, really upsetting. And you know, we all have to go through in our life certain aspects and certain stages that are unavoidable, you know, that are challenging, you know, illness and loss of loved ones and all sorts of difficulties, which are going to be part of the whole journey of life. You know, that's just going to be what it is. But as far as saying a transit is good or bad, it's more like saying, how are you going to cope with this, and what would be the best way of dealing with it. So as far as good or bad is concerned in astrology, I really think those words are really annoying, to sort of refer to anything, to say, is it going to be good? Is it going to be bad? What does it mean? Is it bad? It's just not, that's just not how to view it. It's more, you know, how am I going to cope with this? Is this going to be challenging? And when you've got something, a natal placement, a placement in your natal chart, you know, it's asking, is it good or bad that I've got this placement? It doesn't mean that you're a good or bad person because of this placement, or that placement is good or bad because of what it might mean. You know, depending on some branches of astrology, particularly maybe like Vedic or traditional astrology, they're much quicker to jump to a kind of, oh, that's not a good placement for that planet, or that's not a good this, that, and the other. Especially if you've got planets that are in fall or detriment, for example. I think my moon is in detriment. I'm trying to think now. I know the moon is exalted in Taurus, and I've got moon in Scorpio, and I think it's considered in detriment. I have studied traditional astrology. I don't have my notes in front of me, so I can't remember every single little thing that it refers to. But you know, like if you've got planets that are exalted, or they're in their own sign, or that, you know, like they're kind of elevated, you can have that sort of trine feeling about them. Not necessarily that they feel like a trine, but it's that thing where they're able to express themselves more openly, more freely, and probably more productively. But it's whether or not you actually want to take advantage of that, and to get the best out of them. Because if you've got more challenging placements, you have to do more personal work. So I kind of see it like that. You know, it might be difficult sometimes to work with a Scorpio moon, for example, because they're so deep feeling and so intense, and really hold on to things, and are very emotionally, don't want to say volatile, but you know, there's definitely a very rich, deep emotional environment, which most people aren't even aware is going on for that individual. But that doesn't make it bad. It makes them very emotionally intelligent usually, and able to really connect with people when they're in a lot of pain and relate to them, empathize with them, guide them through some difficult times in their life. So, Scorpio moon, is that such a bad thing? Might be challenging sometimes. I know I find my emotional environment kind of challenging sometimes, but there's some great things about me as well as far as that's concerned. And I think that goes for anybody with a stellium. You know, a stellium is not an indicator of something that's good or bad. Often it's an indicator of a time that somebody was born in history, and some of the big changes that were going on during those periods in history, if we're talking about stelliums that contain some of the more generational planets, and whether or not how these individuals kind of embody um, that aspect of the collective in part of what they do and how they express themselves. um, you know, and maybe might even describe a type of resilience. Maybe there's people out there. Let's look at who was I looking at the other day? I know Meghan Markle has this aspect. I think Prince Harry or Prince William has it as well. Um, Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto in Libra. Yeah, so there's a Saturn Pluto. I think it was William and Meghan Markle have this. There's a Saturn Pluto conjunction in Libra in sort of 1982, and Jupiter was kind of moving through as well. Didn't quite make the conjunction, but was there. And around the time that Saturn and Pluto were together in Libra, I think this is when the AIDS epidemic, which has now been, I think it's been upgraded to pandemic, because it has literally, AIDS was the last thing we had to learn to live with, basically, and the fear of, um, you know, the fear of, having intimacy with somebody, that Libran type of relationship intimacy, the fear around that was, very much connected to that Saturn Pluto conjunction in Libra, and Jupiter involved as well. So they've both got kind of a stellium in a sense. So that describes the time that they were born into. And it also sort of describes times when perhaps they're going to be much more prominent or much more public than others. I know that my chart seems to have been activated when Saturn and Pluto came together. My chart was activated because I have a Saturn Pluto conjunction, and suddenly I'm very plugged into kind of like the collective expression of Saturn and Pluto this time around, working for the health service during a pandemic, and actually sort of dealing with some of my deeper, darker fears, which for some reason I've always been scared of a pandemic occurring. It's just something that I've always been scared of. And so when they announced this, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this is actually happening. This is my biggest fear, blah, blah, blah. So, yes, those planets getting together can be quite challenging, but having them in your natal chart actually can denote a type of resilience that maybe not everybody else has got, Saturn and Pluto particularly, and having a kind of what do you want to call it, like a rejection or a defiance of authority, for example. These are people that are not not scared to question authority, in some ways, and point out, some of the more what you might consider conspiracies, but actually they're becoming a bit more mainstream now. Some of the corruption in the corporate structures, for example. And you might have. So I know a Pisces who has a Jupiter. He has a Jupiter and Venus and Sun in Pisces, classed as a stellium, because they're all in the same sign. Sun's in the 7th, and Jupiter and Venus are in conjunction in the 8th. Now, this person has got lovely person, but they have got a this ability to attract people who want to kind of always women that want to sort of take care of him, and not maybe mother him is perhaps the wrong term. Maybe it's the right term. But if he ever finds himself in a situation where he's got no money, or he's really in a tight spot, there's always a woman offering a spare room for him to stay, basically get him on his feet, help him out, to the point that he almost relies on other people. And Jupiter and Venus in Pisces are supposed to be actually a really nice place to have both of these planets. It's supposed to be very dreamy, poetic, compassionate, forgiving, and wonderful. And this person is a very, very talented person. Really, really talented musician. Very, very beautiful, poetic way of seeing the world, very artistic, a true artist, I would say. However, they have never had to really, I mean, they've struggled in their life, they've had struggles, but they've always had somebody's resources available to them, enable them to do what they want. And when they don't have other people's resources available to them, they just sit there and they just flounder and just wait around until somebody comes along and starts feeding into their financial pot again and helping them out of their situations. So they kind of sit there and just wait for help. So it's an interesting thing, a very interesting observation to sort of think about planets that have been exalted or planets that have been in, planets that are in detriment, planets that are in fall, planets that are in rulership. How are these planets really promoting growth for you and pushing you forward? And if you're okay with not really moving forward in life and not really evolving and not really developing yourself, that's fine too. Like, you don't have to constantly be productive and progressive. I'm a Capricorn, so I guess that's just kind of part of who I am. I want to be always developing myself and pushing myself forward and getting the best out of myself. But it doesn't mean that everybody feels like that, and it's okay to not be constantly like that as well. And I like to have days where I'm not. But if you had something in your chart that described that it was exalted, or it was like, heralded as this wonderful placement, a planetary placement that does all these wonderful things, really kind of try and isolate that planet and understand it on an individual level. Is it really doing you that good? Is it really, really that positive a placement for you? Or are you falling back into the caring, open arms of the safety net of this planet in its most positive expression? Or are you being kicked up the bum by this planet in its most challenging position? So that's what I mean by like the trine and the squares. It's like they push you, or they mollycoddle you. Are you allowing yourself to be mollycoddled by a comfortable placement, or are you allowing yourself to be pushed by a placement that's a little bit sharp on the edges and uncomfortable to sit on? As my old counselling studies teacher used to say to me, she said, I was not afraid to sit on my growing edge. It always used to make us giggle, but I always used to push myself into really uncomfortable situations. And she said it's a really great quality to have. And I think must be all those challenging aspects in my chart that basically force me into sitting on my growing edge. And this is the same with a stellium. Like, you've got planets that are going to work better in some signs than others. If you think about a traditional perspective, you've also got planetary combinations which are challenging to kind of integrate. However, if you're alive and well and speaking and thinking and exploring astrology and looking at your chart now, and you've got a difficult combination, I think I talked about Uranus and Venus together being maybe quite challenging because it's an attracting and repelling nature, a little bit like either end of the magnet. That might be difficult for you in relationships. If you're going to look for a conventional relationship, for example. So it's, that could be difficult, that could be challenging and one for you to work on. However, you've had it your whole life and you're going to have it your whole life. And, we don't just experience one expression of these planets, we experience a multitude of expressions with planets that are considered difficult combinations. So in my blog post about stelliums, I did actually write that they can be a gift and a curse. So you could say that maybe I have kind of said that yes, having a stellium could be good or bad by calling it a gift and a curse. But I didn't mean it like that. What I mean is that a stellium can be such a heavy emphasis in one area of your chart. It can require a lot of attention. It's like my pizza analogy, when I've talked about the toppings on the pizza. And if you go to like a pizza place where they're really sloppy and they just chuck a load of toppings in one area, it's going to be a bit more challenging because um, you know, it's going to be difficult to eat if you're not really a fan of spicy food and you've got like 12 jalapenos on one slice of pizza, and maybe it's covered in cheese and you didn't even notice, and then you took a bite and you've got 12 jalapenos in your mouth. Don't get me wrong, I would enjoy that, but some people wouldn't. Um, so you've got to think about it. If you're going to have that slice of pizza and you're going to get your head blown off with all those jalapenos, it's you might be okay with it, you might be able to cope with it, you might not really do well with hot food, but it's definitely going to be an interesting slice of pizza. And if you're at a party if you're with a bunch of friends and you're all having a slice each and you're the one that got all the toppings, you're going to be the one that gets all the laughs, and maybe some other people are going to be a little bit jealous that you've got some of the toppings, but you're going to be the focal point all the while you're eating that super spicy slice. Now, often with a stellium, and this depends on other chart factors as well, like for example, if you were born with Mercury retrograde natally, or depending on if you've got a lot of Earth placements in your chart or something, where the expression is a bit slower in Earth than it might be in air or fire. It can be a while for you to really follow your true path, depending on how in tune you are. Some people fall into their career path, particularly with stelliums. I think maybe more with like personal stelliums rather than the generational ones, because they are just fixated on a particular area of their life and doing what they really enjoy. So it can be a blessing to have a stellium in an area of your chart. Let's say it's like a third house stellium, for example. Let's say you had like maybe either third house or Gemini stellium. Somebody who's naturally drawn to language, probably has a bit of a gift for musical instruments, is a natural communicator. Potentially maybe they've enjoyed travel and picking up different languages, and they're very knowledgeable in lots of different areas. And maybe they're going to be the type of people that kind of have more than one area of expertise, but they combine those various areas to create something quite unique to themselves. And they'll probably be a constant work in progress if it's a third house / Gemini stellium, for example, a mutable stellium, for example. But it could be that you're that child that picked up an instrument and you just were brilliant at music from the very beginning, and everybody said, oh, you're never going to make any money out of that. But the constant practice and the constant determination and always doing what you loved and just being drawn to it and not being able to drop it, could lead to you end up joining the Royal Symphony Orchestra, and becoming a really well paid session musician, and potentially even being included in music, like session work in studios, and actually earning a really decent wage. So you could be it could be a calling for you. Some stelliums may take a bit longer, because in my case, for example, I was always interested in astrology. I was always interested in it, but I kind of I did what, because I'm a Capricorn, so think about my Aquarius stellium. It's very quirky and unique and different, and I definitely put it down to all the astrology stuff I'm interested in. But if somebody with a Capricorn sun and Aquarius stellium, they're going to have to be this. I'm thinking of this meme that I saw actually, which is quite funny. It was a person sitting there at a laptop dressed in a suit, and somebody had superimposed the unicorn emoji over their head and said, when you're a Capricorn with Aquarius placements. And I was like, this is so me. I am that kind of like hardworking, professional Capricorn, quite serious, but I have all this like glittery unicorn dust Aquarius stellium, and a Jupiter Uranus conjunction as well. So it's quite funny actually. However, it took me a long time, because I went down the Capricorn path instead of going down my Aquarius stellium path. And more to the point, when I was born, the internet didn't exist, podcasting wasn't a thing. I know that astrology was out there, it was very much a thing, and it has been for predating the historical records really. But what I do wasn't a career option. And if I went to career day at school, which I did, and said I wanted to study the planets, I wanted to do astronomy, not enough people were interested in it. And so I was like sitting there like, oh, okay, so just me then, I'm not going to be able to do my chosen career path, studying space and all things planetary and celestial. And I was, like I'd go down to the library and get out loads of astronomy books from the library. And I've talked loads of times on this podcast about my favourite thing on YouTube, Journey to the Edge of the Universe, which you can watch in high definition. And I'd strongly recommend that you do if you are a bit of a space obsessed weirdo like I am. But yeah, it took for a long time for me to actually, find my true calling. It took my Saturn return to kick out the Capricorn, doing what other people want kind of ideals and doing what's right for me, and really feeding into what I think what happened was when Uranus got to Aries, it activated my Jupiter Uranus conjunction, and that's when I started studying astrology, and that's when I started realizing how awesome it was. And then I think during about 2014, when you've got the Uranus Pluto square, is that right? I think so. I think around 2014, the Uranus Pluto square was sort of coming together. Pluto being in Capricorn, Uranus was in Aries, and that's when I started realizing, oh, this is what some people do this for a living. So it's not necessarily that having a stellium is a good or bad thing. It depends, because if you really do have a calling, or you do have a leaning towards a certain area of life, what's challenging more than anything is probably your likelihood to pursue what you love, and to really truly tap into what's truly you, and allow yourself to be who you truly are, or whether or not you're just going to try and continue to fit yourself into a square. If you're a square peg trying to fit into a round hole, and if you're going to keep trying to do that, how, that I think is more the challenge with a stellium. There are other things like, having a 12th house stellium, for example, which might be difficult for you if you are really struggling to identify with any of the planets that you have sitting in those houses, in that house. But again, a good way to tap into some of those mysterious chart placements is to kind of travel to a place where they relocate to a more obvious place in your chart. I do actually cover an episode coming up actually about how to connect with your mysterious chart placements. So I would urge you to tune into that episode. Anyway, I hope I've made you realise that, there's no such thing as good or bad in the chart, but there are conscious and unconscious ways of working with things. There are ways of being more authentic with yourself and following your true path, and following what truly makes you happy, as opposed to trying to fit into what other people want for you. And yeah, hopefully this has helped you to realise that it's not really about good or bad. Those two words I think are just really rubbish words that are kind of a little bit like nice or lovely. Just kind of annoying words that are really nondescript. Fluffy pink words, or bad being, oh, is it bad? It is what it is. You are what you are. You are your chart. You were born at that snapshot in time. You've been working with it your whole life. Are you a bad person? Do you think you're a bad person? Do you think you're doing a bad job of it? I don't. I think everybody that comes to me for a reading is doing a great job of being who they are. And when they consciously awaken and work in a very self-aware way with their own placements, with their natal chart as almost like the map to who they are, amazing things can happen. So don't limit yourself. Don't tell yourself that you're not able to be the best version of yourself because you think you've got a bad placement or a good placement, or your stellium is good or bad. I don't think there's any such thing. Okay, guys, I hope you found it useful, and I guess that's it for today. Don't forget to leave me a review on iTunes if you're enjoying the podcast, or leave me a review wherever you can find a place to do so. I'm on YouTube as well. If you're enjoying it, you can leave a comment below. If you're enjoying, can you hear that phone going mad behind me? It's not my phone even, it's really annoying. Um, but yeah, so I love getting feedback from the podcast. You can contact me on Instagram. I am at Stellium Astro. I think I am on Twitter, and I'm rubbish with Twitter. I've said this before. I tried to rejoin Twitter, and I've only posted about 3 things, so pretty useless at Twitter at the moment. Anyway, that's kind of it for today. So I hope you've enjoyed it and found it useful, and I'll be back next time. Take care, guys. Speak to you later.